Hey everyone! Tonight, we're taking a slow dive into one of the most unusual places ever created. Not a haunted castle, not an ancient civilization, not even outer space. We're going somewhere much stranger. A town sitting peacefully at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, where a sponge lives inside a pineapple. A squirrel survives underwater in a glass dome, and the local fast food restaurant causes more drama than an entire season of reality television. When you stop and think about it, SpongeBob SquarePants is completely ridiculous, and somehow, it's also one of the greatest cartoons ever made. So, before we begin, make yourself comfortable. Dim the lights. Turn your brightness down just a little. Grab a blanket if it's cold. Maybe a snack if you're still awake enough to enjoy one. And if you like long-form documentaries that help you relax while learning something new, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. It really helps the channel. While you're at it, let me know in the comments. How old were you when you first watched SpongeBob? Some of you probably grew up with the very first episode. Others discovered it years later. Either way, welcome back to Bikini Bottom. Take one slow breath. Imagine yourself floating on the surface of the Pacific Ocean. The waves rock you gently. Seagulls circle overhead. The salty air fills your lungs. Now, you begin to sink. The sunlight becomes softer. The water grows cooler. Schools of colorful fish glide past you without a care. In the world, tiny bubbles drift toward the surface. The deeper you go, the quieter everything becomes. Until, far below, you notice something impossible. A neighborhood. Streetlights. Homes. Restaurants, traffic, even people going to work, except they're fish. And somewhere nearby, you hear an overly enthusiastic voice shouting, "I'm ready! I'm ready! I'm ready!" Congratulations, you've arrived. Welcome to Bikini Bottom. If someone pitched SpongeBob today in exactly one sentence, it might sound like this. It's about an endlessly optimistic sea sponge who flips burgers under the ocean. That doesn't exactly scream global phenomenon. In fact, it sounds like the kind of idea people politely smile at before changing the subject. Yet somehow, this strange little cartoon has become one of the biggest animated franchises in television history. Millions of people across the world know exactly what a Krabby Patty is, even though nobody has ever actually eaten one. Entire generations can recognize SpongeBob's laugh within half a second. Parents who watched the show as children now watch it with their own kids. Some college students still quote episodes that first aired before they were even born. That's impressive. Especially for a cartoon whose main character literally has holes in his body. But here's the fascinating part. SpongeBob wasn't trying to be trendy. It wasn't designed around internet memes. There was no social media, no streaming services, no TikTok clips going viral every afternoon. Back in 1999, cartoons lived or died on television ratings. If people didn't tune in, they disappeared. SpongeBob didn't disappear. It exploded. And tonight, we're going to find out why. But to understand SpongeBob, we first have to meet the man who imagined this wonderfully bizarre underwater world. Long before SpongeBob flipped his first imaginary burger, there was a kid who loved the ocean. His name was Hillenburg. If you had met him as a child, You probably wouldn't have guessed he would someday create one of the most recognizable cartoon characters on Earth. He liked drawing. He liked animals. Most of all, he loved marine life. Not sharks, not whales. Everything. Sea stars. Coral reefs. Seaweed. Tiny creatures most people never stop to notice. While many children dreamed about becoming astronauts or superheroes, Stephen became fascinated by what existed beneath the waves. That fascination never left him. Years later, he studied marine biology in college. Now, marine biology doesn't exactly sound like the usual path toward becoming a cartoon creator. Most people imagine animators sitting behind sketchbooks, not studying ecosystems, not identifying sea creatures, not explaining tidal habitats. But Hillenburg genuinely loved teaching people about the ocean. For a while, he actually worked as a marine biology teacher. Picture the scene. You're sitting in class. The teacher wants everyone excited about tide pools. Not exactly an easy assignment. So instead of handing out pages full of scientific diagrams, he creates funny little comics, simple drawings, expressive faces, goofy jokes. Suddenly, students who weren't interested in sea life start paying attention. Because stories are memorable. Facts attached to stories become unforgettable. Without realizing it, Stephen Hillenburg had stumbled onto the formula that would eventually make SpongeBob famous. Teach people something while making them laugh. One of those educational comics featured a cheerful little sponge. It wasn't SpongeBob yet, not even close, but the seed had been planted. Sometimes history doesn't begin with a grand announcement. Sometimes it begins with a doodle in the corner of a worksheet. Eventually, Hillenburg decided to study animation. That was a risky move. Animation is competitive, time-consuming, and far from guaranteed success. Imagine telling your family, "I'm leaving my stable teaching career to draw cartoons." That's either incredibly brave or incredibly terrifying. Fortunately for millions of viewers, it worked. He attended the California Institute of the Arts, often called CalArts, one of the most respected animation schools in the world. Many legendary animators studied there. Disney artists, Pixar artists, future television creators. The halls were filled with people chasing impossible dreams using pencils and stacks of paper. Animation today often happens inside powerful computers. Back then, every second required enormous effort. 24 drawings could make just 1 second of movement. Think about that. A single episode lasting 11 minutes required thousands upon thousands of drawings. Every blink, every smile, every jellyfish, every bubble created 1 frame at a time. Suddenly, that little yellow sponge doesn't seem quite so simple anymore. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine someone asks you to invent an underwater city. Most people would probably make it realistic. Coral reefs, shipwrecks, schools of fish. Maybe a treasure chest or two. Stephen Hillenburg looked at that idea and quietly threw realism overboard. Why should houses all look the same? One becomes a pineapple. Another is shaped like an Easter Island head. One is literally a rock. 'Cause why not? Why should fish behave exactly like fish? Instead, they go boating, attend concerts, complain about work, visit hospitals, watch television, pay taxes, probably. Nobody really wants to think about Bikini Bottom tax season. The beauty of SpongeBob's world is that it follows its own logic. Questions that seem important simply aren't. How does fire exist underwater? It just does. How can SpongeBob write with a pencil? Don't worry about it. Why does Gary meow? Because it's funny. The show trusts you to accept the impossible. And once you do, it rewards you with a universe where absolutely anything can happen. That creative freedom became one of SpongeBob's greatest strengths. Every episode could introduce a completely new idea. Time travel? Sure. Ghost pirates? Why not? Superheroes? Absolutely. A giant bubble capable of carrying an entire city? Of course. The rules bent whenever comedy needed them to. Yet, somehow, Bikini Bottom never stopped feeling like a real place. Not because it obeyed physics, but because its characters felt real. Everyone knows someone like SpongeBob, the relentlessly cheerful coworker, someone like Squidward, the exhausted employee counting the hours until the weekend, someone like Patrick, the lovable friend who somehow survives despite making spectacularly questionable decisions. That's the secret. The world is absurd. The emotions are genuine. And that's why, decades later, people still connect with these characters. In the next chapter, we'll finally meet the sponge himself, the endlessly optimistic Fry Cook, whose SquarePants changed animation forever. So settle in. The pineapple's front door is just ahead. And trust me, its owner is already awake. The sun never really rises in Bikini Bottom, at least not the way it does up on the surface. Instead, the ocean slowly grows brighter. Light filters through miles of seawater, scattering into shimmering ribbons that dance across the sand. The whole town begins to glow. And inside, one very recognizable pineapple. An alarm clock rings. Beep, beep, beep. Before it can even finish. A bright yellow sponge launches out of bed with enough enthusiasm to concern every sleep expert on Earth. I'm ready. No groaning, no hitting the snooze button, no lying in bed wondering if answering emails can legally count as exercise. Just instant happiness, honestly. If SpongeBob existed in real life, he'd probably be the only person smiling in line at the DMV. He throws open the curtains. His bedroom fills with warm golden light. Gary meows from the floor. Breakfast is prepared with almost military precision. Shoes polished, tie perfectly straight, hat ready for work. Within minutes, he's sprinting out the front door. Not because he has to, because he genuinely cannot wait to start his day. And that's perhaps the strangest thing about SpongeBob. His superpower isn't strength. It isn't intelligence. It isn't speed. It's enthusiasm. Until they actually have one. Imagine you own a restaurant. One day an employee arrives. Always early. Never calls in sick. Loves every customer. Never complains. Treats every burger like it's a 5-star gourmet meal. Sounds perfect, right? Well, there's one tiny catch. He also accidentally starts fires, causes explosions, invites jellyfish into the kitchen, destroys expensive equipment, and somehow turns every normal Tuesday into a full-scale emergency. Welcome to Employing SpongeBob SquarePants. He's the kind of worker every manager dreams about for approximately 6 minutes. After that, things usually explode. Literally, this is one of the biggest questions surrounding SpongeBob. Why is he always optimistic? The answer isn't that life is easy. Far from it. Customers yell at him. Plankton attacks the restaurant almost daily. Squidward insults him before breakfast. Mr. Krabs occasionally chooses money over common sense. Yet SpongeBob keeps smiling. That optimism became one of the defining traits of the show. Not because it's realistic, but because it's comforting. Everyone has difficult days. Watching someone bounce back from disaster with a laugh feels strangely reassuring. It's almost like the show quietly whispers, "Tomorrow can still be a good day." That's a surprisingly powerful message hidden inside a cartoon about talking sea creatures. Here's a fun fact. SpongeBob wasn't originally called SpongeBob SquarePants. During development, his name was going to be SpongeBoy. Simple enough, except there was a problem. The name had already been trademarked by another company. Imagine if history had gone differently. Millions of children might have grown up shouting, "SpongeBoy!" It just doesn't sound quite right. Sometimes tiny legal details quietly shape pop culture forever. Fortunately, SquarePants has a much nicer rhythm. Say it out loud. SpongeBob SquarePants, the name almost bounces. Just like the character. Now let's talk about that laugh. You know the one. You probably heard it in your head the moment I mentioned it. It's cheerful, completely unmistakable. And, depending on your mood, either wonderfully infectious or mildly capable of driving you insane. There is almost no middle ground. Voice actor Tom Kenny gave SpongeBob a personality that animation had rarely seen before. The laugh, the little gasps, the excited squeals, even the way SpongeBob says "okay," every sound feels instantly recognizable. That's much harder than it seems. Many cartoon characters are memorable because of what they do. SpongeBob is memorable because of how he sounds. Close your eyes, and you'd still know exactly who was speaking. That's the mark of iconic character design, not just visually, but emotionally. Over the years, people began noticing something unexpected. Adults enjoyed SpongeBob almost as much as children. Kids laughed at the silly faces. Adults caught the workplace jokes. Children saw colorful adventures. Adults recognized office politics. Everyone found something different. It's a bit like revisiting a favorite movie years later and suddenly understanding jokes that completely flew over your head as a kid. The cartoon hadn't changed. You had. That's one reason SpongeBob has stayed relevant for so long. It grows with its audience. Here's another interesting detail. SpongeBob almost never gives up. He's rejected. He tries again. He fails. He laughs. Then he tries again. It's easy to dismiss that as cartoon optimism. But think about it. How many successful people reached their goals without failing first? Probably fewer than you'd think. SpongeBob's persistence borders on absurdity. Yet, there's something admirable about refusing to let embarrassment stop you. Would most of us survive a single shift at the Krusty Krab? Probably not. Would SpongeBob survive our jobs? He'd probably improve employee morale before accidentally flooding the building. Take another slow breath. Imagine standing outside the pineapple once more. The morning rush has already begun. SpongeBob races toward work, humming to himself. The scent of salty water drifts through the neighborhood. Colorful fish pedal past in boatmobiles. Seaweed sways gently like underwater trees. Everything feels oddly peaceful, at least for the next few minutes. Because just across the street, someone is already regretting being awake. And his name is Squidward Tentacles. if SpongeBob is sunshine. Squidward is Monday morning. He opens his front door with the enthusiasm of someone expecting disappointment. To be fair, he's usually right. Across the street, SpongeBob waves enthusiastically. Patrick is already wandering over with an idea that almost certainly ends in disaster. Squidward closes his eyes for a brief moment. Not because he's tired, because he's mentally preparing himself. You know that feeling when your phone buzzes late at night? And before reading the message, you somehow already know it's going to become your problem? That's Squidward's entire life, every single day. Here's a funny little piece of animation trivia. Despite his name, Squidward isn't really a squid. He's actually much closer to an octopus. Animators chose 6 limbs instead of 8, because drawing 8 arms in every scene would have taken significantly more work. Animation often hides practical decisions inside creative ones. So yes, one of television's most famous squids isn't technically a squid. Biologists probably noticed immediately. Everyone else was too busy laughing. Walk into Squidward's house. You'll immediately notice something different. It's quieter, more organized. Clarinet music echoes through the rooms. Paintings line the walls. Busts and sculptures sit proudly on shelves. Squidward doesn't see himself as a cashier. He sees himself as an artist temporarily trapped inside customer service. Unfortunately, the world hasn't quite caught up to his vision. His clarinet performances rarely go well. His artwork receives mixed reactions. His dreams of fame remain frustratingly out of reach. It's both funny and strangely heartbreaking, because almost everyone has experienced something similar. Working one job while dreaming about another. Children often see Squidward as grumpy. Adults tend to see something else. Burnout. He's exhausted. He's underappreciated. He desperately wants peace and quiet. Instead, he lives next door to 2 walking natural disasters. Imagine trying to read a book while your neighbors invent a bubble-powered marching band every afternoon. Forever. You'd probably become a little cranky too. Over time, Squidward transformed into one of television's most relatable characters. Not because he always behaves well, but because his frustrations feel familiar. He's the reminder that even in the happiest places, someone still has to answer customer complaints. Here's the thing people sometimes forget. Squidward isn't heartless. Every now and then, the mask slips. He helps SpongeBob. He worries about Patrick. He even sacrifices his own comfort when it truly matters. Those moments are rare, which makes them meaningful. Because kindness means more when it comes from someone who doesn't hand it out freely. Underneath all the sarcasm, there's still a decent neighbor. He just wishes everyone would please stop knocking on his door before 9 in the morning. As the day continues, 3 very different personalities are about to collide. One endlessly optimistic sponge, one permanently exhausted octopus, and one pink starfish whose greatest achievement today might simply be remembering his own name. Trust me, things are about to get wonderfully ridiculous. The morning has only just begun. SpongeBob is halfway to work. Squidward is already questioning every life decision that led him to this neighborhood. And, across the street, beneath an ordinary-looking brown rock, something begins to move. The rock slowly lifts. A pair of sleepy eyes blink at the bright underwater sunlight. Then a familiar voice says, "Good morning," followed immediately by, "Or is it afternoon? Welcome to Patrick Starr's house. Although calling it a house might be generous. It's a rock, literally. Not a rock-shaped house, not a cleverly disguised apartment, just a very large rock. Lift it up, and that's home. Honestly, considering today's housing prices, Patrick might be onto something. No mortgage, no rent, no HOA sending strongly worded letters because your lawn is half an inch too tall. Just one rock, simple, peaceful, probably not waterproof, but somehow it works. If SpongeBob is endless energy, Patrick is endless relaxation. He doesn't rush. He doesn't worry about schedules. He doesn't keep a planner. In fact, it's entirely possible Patrick doesn't know what a planner is. If SpongeBob lives every day like it's the biggest adventure of his life, Patrick treats every day like it's a Saturday afternoon with absolutely nothing on the calendar. And somehow, these two become inseparable. On paper, it shouldn't work. One wakes up before sunrise, eager to conquer the day. The other wakes up whenever the day politely asks him to. Yet they're best friends. Maybe that's because real friendships aren't built on being identical. They're built on enjoying each other's company. Even when one of you accidentally turns a simple walk into an all-day catastrophe. This question has been debated by fans for years. Is Patrick truly unintelligent? Or does he simply experience the world in a completely different way? The obvious answer is that Patrick is written for comedy. His misunderstandings create some of the show's funniest moments. He forgets things. He misinterprets simple instructions. He confidently reaches spectacularly incorrect conclusions. And yet, every once in a while, Patrick says something surprisingly insightful. It's almost as if his brain works like an old light switch. Most days the lights flicker. Then, out of nowhere, everything clicks into place. For one brief, glorious moment, Patrick sounds like the wisest philosopher in Bikini Bottom. Then, just as quickly, he forgets what everyone was talking about. It's oddly charming. Think about someone you've known for years, maybe a childhood friend, maybe a cousin, maybe that one coworker who somehow survives every chaotic situation, despite making questionable decisions every 5 minutes. Patrick represents a kind of innocence that's surprisingly rare. He isn't trying to impress anyone. He doesn't care about status. He isn't chasing promotions or popularity. He's perfectly content sitting under his rock, watching bubbles drift by. There's something relaxing about that. Modern life often feels like an endless checklist. Answer emails, pay bills, update passwords. Remember the password you updated yesterday. Patrick has none of those concerns. His biggest decision today might be whether to take another nap. Honestly, that sounds kind of peaceful. Now don't misunderstand. Patrick's laid-back personality has consequences. Many of Bikini Bottom's biggest disasters begin with one very innocent sentence. Hey, SpongeBob! Those two words have launched more chaos than anyone could reasonably calculate. Want to catch jellyfish? Sure. Build a giant sand fortress? Why not? Invent a game with rules nobody understands? Absolutely. Patrick approaches every idea with complete confidence, whether the idea is brilliant or absolutely terrible. Usually it's the second one. But here's the interesting thing. Patrick never intends to cause problems. He's motivated by curiosity, excitement, friendship. Sometimes that's enough. Let's take a look inside Patrick's home. Or what passes for a home. There's very little furniture, very few possessions, no expensive decorations, no complicated gadgets, just the basics. It's almost impossible not to compare it to modern life. Many of us own closets full of things we rarely use. Drawers packed with old cables, boxes labeled important that haven't been opened in years. Patrick owns almost nothing. And somehow he seems perfectly happy. Now that's not exactly practical advice. Please don't throw away all your furniture after watching this, but it is an interesting reminder. Sometimes happiness has surprisingly little to do with how much stuff we own. If SpongeBob had never met Patrick, the series would feel completely different. Patrick encourages adventure. He says yes when everyone else says no. He's the first person willing to join SpongeBob's wild ideas, even if neither of them has the slightest clue what they're doing. Especially then. Think back to your own life. Most memorable stories probably didn't begin with careful planning. They began with a friend saying, "This might be fun." Patrick is that friend. Sometimes that's wonderful. Sometimes it's a terrible idea. Usually, it's both. Picture yourself sitting beside Patrick's rock. The ocean is calm, tiny fish swim lazily through the water. Sunbeams ripple across the sandy floor. Patrick lies on his back, staring upward. No phone, no notifications, no deadlines, just silence. For a moment, you understand why SpongeBob enjoys spending time here. Life slows down. The world feels simpler, even if only for a little while. Unfortunately, SpongeBob suddenly remembers something. He's late, not by much, but late enough to send him sprinting across Bikini Bottom at full speed. Patrick waves cheerfully. "Have fun at work!" He has absolutely no intention of following. After all, someone has to stay behind and make sure the rock doesn't go anywhere. It's a very important job. As SpongeBob disappears down the street, the unmistakable smell of grilled burgers begins drifting through the water. A wooden building comes into view. A weathered sign swings gently in the current. The lunchtime rush is about to begin. And inside that restaurant waits one of the most famous employers in cartoon history. In the next chapter, we'll step inside the Krusty Krab, the restaurant that transformed a whole humble fry cook into a television legend and sparked one of animation's greatest rivalries. Follow the smell. You don't even need a map. Somewhere ahead, onions are sizzling. A grill crackles steadily. Fresh buns toast until they're golden. Pickles, lettuce, tomatoes, and something that has fueled decades of cartoon mystery all come together in perfect harmony. As you round the corner, you finally see it. A weathered wooden building sits proudly on the edge of the street. Its design resembles an old lobster trap, complete with thick wooden beams, ropes, and nautical decorations that have clearly seen better days. A faded sign swings gently in the underwater current. It isn't the biggest building in Bikini Bottom. It isn't the fanciest. In fact, if you walk past it in real life, you might mistake it for a seafood shack that's been open since your grandparents were kids. But appearances can be deceiving. Because inside this humble restaurant, history is being made one burger at a time. Push open the front door. A tiny brass bell jingles overhead. Immediately, you're greeted by organized chaos. Customers chatter across the dining room. The scent of grilled patties fills the air. Wooden floors creak under every step. A sailor-themed chandelier sways gently overhead. Menus hang on the walls, offering food that's somehow both incredibly simple and endlessly desirable. There's something strangely comforting about the place. It feels familiar, almost nostalgic, like the neighborhood diner where everyone seems to know each other by name, even if you've never been here before. With more lore than some fantasy novels, think about your favorite restaurant. Now imagine every important event in your town somehow happens there. Birthday celebrations, business deals, epic rivalries, unexpected disasters, musical performances, even the occasional robot invasion. That's the Krusty Krab. It's more than a restaurant. It's the social center of Bikini Bottom. Need a job? Go to the Krusty Krab. Need lunch? Go to the Krusty Krab. Need to accidentally witness one of Plankton's latest ridiculous inventions explode? Believe it or not, also the Krusty Krab. The building has become so central to the series that it's almost a character itself. Its wooden walls have seen friendships grow, arguments erupt, and enough failed robberies to keep an insurance company awake at night. From somewhere in the back office, you hear the unmistakable sound of coins being counted. Not one or two, hundreds of them, perhaps thousands. The door swings open. Out walks a bright red crab wearing a crisp blue shirt, black belt, and a smile that somehow looks both welcoming and financially cautious. Eugene Harold Krabs, better known simply as Mr. Krabs. If SpongeBob is the heart of the restaurant, Mr. Krabs is its wallet. Everything he does is measured against one simple question. Will this make money? If the answer is yes, he's interested. If the answer is no, he suddenly remembers he has an important meeting. It's one of the show's oldest running jokes. His love of money borders on the supernatural. He can hear a single coin drop from rooms away. He treats loose change with the care most people reserve for priceless family heirlooms. To Mr. Krabs, every penny has a purpose. Now, it would be easy to reduce Mr. Krabs to one personality trait: money. But like many great characters, there is more beneath the surface. Long before he became a restaurant owner, Mr. Krabs served as a sailor. That background explains his nautical vocabulary, his weathered appearance, and his ability to stay surprisingly calm during absolute chaos. He's seen storms. He's faced danger. He's built a business from the ground up. And, despite his obsession with profits, there are moments when his softer side quietly appears, especially when it comes to his daughter, Pearl, or the restaurant he's spent years building. Deep down, Mr. Krabs isn't just protecting his money. He's protecting everything he's worked for. That doesn't excuse some of his more questionable decisions, of course. Choosing a single dollar over common sense has gotten him into trouble more than once, but it makes him feel surprisingly human. Walk a little farther toward the kitchen. You hear cheerful humming. Metal spatulas clink against the grill. Steam rises from perfectly cooked patties. Standing behind the counter is SpongeBob, wearing his white cook's hat with unmistakable pride. Watch him for a moment. Every burger receives the same care. Every bun is toasted just right. Every topping is carefully placed. There's no rushing, no shortcuts, no good enough. To SpongeBob, making a Krabby Patty isn't just cooking, it's craftsmanship. He treats every order like a tiny work of art. Imagine if everyone approached their jobs with that level of enthusiasm. The world might run a little differently. Traffic would probably still be terrible, but lunch would be fantastic. Of course, running a restaurant means dealing with customers. Lots of customers. Some are polite, Some know exactly what they want. Others stare at the menu for 15 minutes before ordering the exact same thing everyone else ordered. Sound familiar? One reason the Krusty Krab feels so relatable is because despite being underwater and populated by talking fish, its daily problems are surprisingly ordinary. Busy lunch hours, equipment breaking, difficult customers, long shifts. Anyone who's ever worked in retail or food service can probably watch an episode and think, yep, I've met that customer before. The setting is absurd. The experiences are surprisingly real. Now we arrive at perhaps the greatest mystery in Bikini Bottom, the Krabby Patty. What makes it so special? Why do customers line up day after day? Why has one tiny green plankton dedicated so much of his life to stealing its recipe? The answer is that we never fully find out. And that's intentional. The secret formula has become one of animation's longest-running mysteries. Fans have spent decades creating theories. Some are clever. Some are wildly imaginative. Others involve enough speculation to make conspiracy documentaries look restrained. But the show rarely gives a definitive answer. Because sometimes the mystery is more entertaining than the solution. The unknown keeps people curious. And curiosity keeps stories alive. The music becomes softer. The sounds of the restaurant fade into calm ocean ambiance. Take one last look around. The lunch rush begins to settle. Customers finish their meals. The grill cools. Sunlight filters through the restaurant's windows, casting gentle patterns across the wooden floor. SpongeBob wipes down the counter with the same care he used to prepare every burger. Mr. Krabs quietly locks today's earnings inside his safe, smiling with satisfaction. Outside, Bikini Bottom carries on as if nothing extraordinary happened. But that's the magic of the Krusty Krab. Every ordinary day has the potential to become an unforgettable adventure. And speaking of unforgettable, across the street, inside a lonely little restaurant that almost never has customers, someone is watching. Someone very small, very determined, and very obsessed with one secret recipe. In our next chapter, we'll meet Sheldon J. Plankton, the tiniest villain in Bikini Bottom, whose biggest dream has fueled one of television's funniest rivalries for more than 25 years. Take a slow walk across the street. Leave the warm glow of the Krusty Krab behind. The laughter grows quieter. The smell of fresh burgers slowly disappears. The streets become almost empty. Ahead of you stands another restaurant. Or, at least, it claims to be a restaurant. Its metal walls look cold compared to the cozy wood of the Krusty Krab. The sign outside flickers. Paint peels from the edges. The parking spaces are completely empty. Not a single customer. Not one. The only sound is the gentle hum of electricity. Welcome to the Chum Bucket. If the Krusty Krab feels like your favorite neighborhood diner, the Chum Bucket feels like the place your GPS accidentally recommends at 2 in the morning. You hesitate before opening the door. Honestly, that's probably a reasonable survival instinct. The bell above the entrance gives a tired little ring. Inside, there's silence. Rows of spotless tables wait for guests who never arrive. Menus hang neatly on the walls. Everything is surprisingly clean. Almost too clean. It's the kind of place that looks ready for business every single day, despite never actually having any business. If you've ever walked past a store and wondered, how is this place still open? Congratulations, you've just described the Chum bucket. Then, you hear a voice. Who's there? It's loud, confident, maybe just a little dramatic. You look around the room. Nobody. You glance behind the counter. Still nobody. Finally, you look down, way down. Standing on the floor is a tiny green Plankton. Just one eye, two little arms, a surprisingly expressive face, and enough confidence to introduce himself as if he's 6 feet tall. This is Sheldon J. Plankton, one of animation's smallest characters, and one of its biggest personalities. His size has always been part of the joke. He's so tiny that other characters sometimes forget he's standing there. Doors are enormous. Furniture looks gigantic. A simple drinking straw might as well be a tree trunk. Yet Plankton refuses to let his size define him. In his mind, he's already the greatest scientific genius the ocean has ever known. The rest of Bikini Bottom simply hasn't realized it yet. Now imagine opening a restaurant directly across the street from your biggest competitor. Every single morning, you watch hundreds of customers walk into their building. Meanwhile, your restaurant remains empty. Day after day, year after year, most people would eventually give up. Maybe change careers. Maybe open a bakery instead. Not Plankton. His determination borders on legendary. He's convinced that success is always just one invention away. One brilliant plan, one perfect opportunity, one stolen recipe. Unfortunately, those plans almost never survive contact with reality. Let's talk about the obsession, the Krabby Patty. Secret formula. For decades, fans have asked the same question. What's in it? Why is it so valuable? Why doesn't Mr. Krabs simply lock it in a vault somewhere far away? The truth is, the formula is more than a recipe. It's a symbol. To Plankton, it represents everything he believes he's been denied. Success, recognition, customers, respect. He doesn't just want to sell burgers. He wants proof that he can finally win. That's what makes his story surprisingly interesting. Behind every outrageous invention and every ridiculous disguise, there's a character desperately trying to prove that he matters. Of course, trying to steal your competitor's signature product isn't exactly the healthiest business strategy, but it certainly makes for entertaining television. Here's the funny part. Plankton is incredibly intelligent. He's built giant robots, mind control devices, advanced computers, machines capable of doing things that would completely change life in Bikini Bottom. If he used even half that talent to improve his own restaurant, he'd probably become wildly successful. Instead, he spends most of his energy creating increasingly complicated plans to steal one recipe. It's a bit like building a spaceship because you don't want to wait in traffic. Technically impressive, completely unnecessary. Sometimes the hardest obstacle isn't the competition, it's convincing yourself there's only one path to success. Just as Plankton begins explaining his latest master plan, a calm electronic voice interrupts him. That plan has a 0.03% chance of succeeding. Meet Karen, Plankton's computer wife. Yeah, you heard that correctly. A computer. One of the longest running and most unexpectedly wholesome relationships in the series belongs to a tiny Plankton and an artificial intelligence. Karen is intelligent, practical, patient. Well, patient most of the time. She spends much of her life reminding Plankton that his ideas may have one or two or several hundred flaws. Think of Karen as the voice of reason. The one friend who gently says, maybe don't press the giant red button. Whether Plankton listens is another matter entirely. Here's something interesting. Plankton is technically the villain. He lies, he cheats, he steals. He invents machines specifically designed to cause trouble. And yet, many viewers still find themselves rooting for him. Why? Because failure is oddly relatable. We've all worked hard on something that didn't go according to plan. We've all watched someone else succeed while wondering why our own efforts weren't enough. Plankton exaggerates those feelings into comedy. His schemes fail spectacularly. He dusts himself off. Then, somehow, he starts planning the next one before the smoke has even cleared. There's a strange kind of resilience in that. Perhaps not admirable in method, but undeniably impressive in persistence. Stand outside the Chum bucket one last time. The lights inside glow softly against the quiet street. Across the road, the Krusty Krab buzzes with happy customers. For a moment, everything is still. 2 restaurants, 2 owners, 2 very different ideas of success. One built on loyal customers and hard work. The other chasing shortcuts that never quite pay off. Maybe that's one of the simplest lessons, hidden beneath all the jokes. Real success rarely comes from taking someone else's achievements. It usually comes from building something people genuinely love. Plankton may never fully learn that lesson, but his endless determination has given us some of the funniest moments in SpongeBob history. And as night slowly begins to settle over Bikini Bottom, another familiar figure is preparing for a completely different kind of adventure, far beyond the sandy streets, inside a giant glass dome where the air is dry and the trees are green. A squirrel from Texas is about to prove that even the strangest ideas can feel perfectly at home. In our next chapter, we'll meet Sandy Cheeks, scientist, inventor, karate champion, and perhaps the most extraordinary resident Bikini Bottom has ever welcomed. Take a slow walk away from the busy streets of Bikini Bottom. The sounds of the Krusty Krab grow quieter. Boatmobiles pass less frequently. The sandy roads slowly give way to wide open spaces. Ahead of you, something catches your eye. It doesn't belong here, not even a little. In the middle of the ocean floor, surrounded by coral and seaweed, stands a giant glass dome. Inside, there's grass, real grass. Trees sway gently in the breeze. Colorful flowers bloom beneath warm sunlight. A wooden picnic table sits in the shade of an oak tree. You blink. Hold on, you're underwater. How is there a breeze? How are there trees? More importantly, how is there a squirrel? Welcome to Tree Dome, perhaps the most unusual address in all of Bikini Bottom. And, considering one of the neighbors literally lives under a rock, that's saying something. Before the front door even opens, you hear the unmistakable sound of something spinning through the air. Whoosh! A rope whips overhead, then another. A figure swings gracefully from a tree branch before landing perfectly in front of you. She's wearing a white astronaut-style suit with a clear glass helmet. A bright purple flower decorates the top. She smiles confidently. Howdy! Meet Sandy Cheeks, scientist, engineer, inventor, karate champion, rodeo expert, explorer, and, somehow, still one of the friendliest people in Bikini Bottom. If SpongeBob represents endless optimism, Sandy represents endless curiosity. She's the kind of person who sees a difficult problem and immediately asks, I wonder if I can build something that solves it. It's a fair question. Probably one of the first questions you'd ask if you actually arrived here. The answer is surprisingly simple. Sandy came from Texas to study life beneath the ocean. Think about that for a second. Most scientists travel to laboratories, research stations, universities. Sandy moved to the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. That's commitment. Of course, living underwater presents one rather significant challenge. Squirrels generally prefer breathing air. Fortunately, Sandy happens to be an engineering genius. So instead of accepting the impossible, she invented a solution, the tree dome, a giant air-filled habitat, allowing her to live comfortably beneath the sea while keeping all the things that remind her of home. Grass, trees, fresh air, even the occasional acorn. It's part laboratory, part greenhouse, and part little piece of Texas. Now, imagine you're SpongeBob. You've spent your entire life underwater. Breathing water isn't something you think about. It's just normal. One day, your new friend invites you inside her house. Seems harmless enough. You open the door, step inside, and suddenly, you can't breathe. No water, just air. Your throat feels dry. Your body panics. It's one of the earliest and funniest reminders that every character experiences the world differently. For Sandy, air is comfort. For SpongeBob, it's a survival challenge. Their friendship works because they're willing to learn from each other's worlds, even if it occasionally involves nearly drying out like an old kitchen sponge left beside the sink. If Bikini Bottom ever held an intelligence competition, Sandy would probably be among the favorites. Her inventions range from incredibly practical to wonderfully ridiculous. Rocket ships, advanced submarines, robotic machines, scientific experiments, devices capable of solving problems no one else even understands. Of course, being the smartest person in the room isn't always easy. Sometimes your ideas seem impossible. Sometimes people underestimate you. Sometimes your latest invention accidentally launches itself across town. Science can be unpredictable. Progress usually involves a few explosions along the way. Science isn't Sandy's only passion. If you've ever watched her spar with SpongeBob, you already know. She can absolutely hold her own. Karate in Bikini Bottom isn't just a hobby. It's a full-speed, acrobatic, bubble-filled spectacle. The two friends leap across rooftops, bounce between giant coral formations, exchange playful kicks and flips with astonishing precision. It's energetic, creative, and surprisingly graceful. The best part, they're not fighting because they're angry. They're challenging each other to improve. Competition doesn't have to create enemies. Sometimes it creates stronger friendships. Despite loving Bikini Bottom, Sandy never forgets where she came from. Texas isn't simply a place on the map. It's part of who she is. She proudly talks about it, celebrates its traditions, shares stories about life on the surface. And every now and then, she gets a little homesick. That's something many people can understand. Whether you've moved across the country or simply left your hometown for school or work, there's always something comforting about remembering where your journey began. Home has a funny way of staying with us, even if we travel thousands of miles away, or, in Sandy's case, several thousand feet beneath the ocean. It's easy to admire superheroes who save the world, but Sandy shows another kind of bravery. The courage to leave everything familiar behind. Imagine arriving somewhere completely different. New customs, new neighbors, new environment. Even the basic act of breathing requires special equipment. Most people would feel overwhelmed. Sandy embraces the challenge. She stays curious, keeps learning, makes friends, builds a life. That's a lesson hidden quietly beneath all the comedy. Growth often begins the moment we step outside our comfort zone. Without Sandy, SpongeBob's world would be much smaller. She's the one encouraging him to experiment, to ask questions, to think beyond what he already knows. In return, SpongeBob reminds Sandy that not every problem needs a complicated equation. Sometimes joy itself is enough. Their friendship is built on balance, logic and imagination, science and silliness, planning and spontaneity. Neither tries to become the other. Instead, they appreciate what makes each of them unique. That's a surprisingly mature message for a cartoon that also features jellyfish rodeos. Take one last look around. The sun begins to set far above the ocean. Golden light filters through the glass dome. Leaves sway gently overhead. Somewhere nearby, a small machine quietly hums as it keeps the habitat running. Sandy sits on her porch, looking out through the glass at the underwater world beyond. Fish glide peacefully past. Bubbles drift toward the surface. Two completely different worlds, separated by nothing more than a sheet of glass. And somehow, they fit together perfectly. Perhaps that's one of SpongeBob's greatest strengths. It reminds us that friendship doesn't require everyone to be the same. Sometimes the most meaningful friendships grow between people who seem completely different at first. As the evening settles over Bikini Bottom, the lights of the tree dome begin to glow softly in the distance. But tomorrow morning, our journey takes us somewhere every resident knows by heart. A place filled with laughter, bright colors, and countless tiny creatures drifting through the water like living fireworks. In the next chapter, we'll explore Jellyfish Fields, one of the most beautiful locations in Bikini Bottom, and the place where SpongeBob feels truly free. And just like that, our journey through Bikini Bottom comes to an end. Over the last couple of hours, we've wandered beneath the waves, stepped inside a pineapple, flipped Krabby Patties, watched Plankton chase impossible dreams, explored the tree dome, and met a cast of characters who somehow feel just as familiar today as they did decades ago. On the surface, SpongeBob SquarePants is a cartoon about talking sea creatures. But if you stayed with me this long, you probably know it's much more than that. It's a story about finding joy in ordinary days, about chasing your dreams even when they seem impossible, about appreciating friends who make life a little brighter even if they occasionally drive you completely crazy. It's about optimism without pretending life is perfect. It's about laughter during difficult times. And perhaps most importantly, it's about never losing that childlike sense of wonder that reminds us there's still magic hiding in the everyday moments. Maybe that's why SpongeBob has lasted for so many years. Not because of the jokes alone, not because of the memes, not even because of the unforgettable characters. It has endured because in one way or another, every one of us can see a little piece of ourselves somewhere in Bikini Bottom. Maybe you're SpongeBob, waking up each morning determined to make the best of the day. Maybe you're Squidward, quietly hoping for a little peace and quiet after a long week. Maybe you're Patrick, reminding everyone that slowing down isn't always a bad thing. Maybe you're Sandy, always curious about what's waiting beyond the horizon. Or maybe, on certain days, you feel a little like Plankton, working hard and hoping your next big idea finally works out. Whatever brought you here tonight, I hope this journey helped you relax. I hope it made you smile. And if you happen to be drifting off to sleep right now, I hope your dreams are filled with calm oceans, gentle waves, and just enough bubbles to remind you that imagination never really grows old. Thank you for spending your time with me. In a world that constantly asks for our attention, it means more than you know that you chose to spend a little of your day or night here. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to leave a like. Subscribe if you'd like to join us on future adventures. And then let me know down in the comments. What stories should we explore next? I read as many of your comments as I can, and your suggestions often inspire these videos. Until next time, take care of yourself. Get some rest. Stay curious. Keep your sense of wonder. And remember, sometimes the most extraordinary stories are hiding in the places we'd least expect, even at the bottom of the ocean. Sleep well, and I'll see you in the next adventure.